The envelope sat on my porch rail like it knew it didn't belong there. Stamped in gold foil with the words Cedar Bluff Homeowners Association, it looked too fancy for a man like me. Most of the mail I got came in dust-covered envelopes from the feed store or plain white ones from the county assessor. Nothing gold. Nothing that smelled like perfume and self-importance. I turned it over in my hands a few times before opening it. The morning sun was low and sharp, cutting through the oak trees and spilling across the porch boards. My coffee had gone cold, but my dog, Boone, watched me like he could sense that this letter wasn't good news. I tore the seal and pulled the paper out. Heavy stock, like something you get from a lawyer. Notice of property relocation, it read. That phrase alone made my stomach twist. I read it once, then twice, slower the second time, tracing the words with my finger like maybe I'd misread them. According to the HOA, the same one that didn't exist when I bought this land 20 years ago, my tiny parcel of the north side of the ranch was being reassigned for community recreation purposes. They said I'd be compensated. Said it was for the benefit of all Cedar Bluff residents. They might as well have said they were taking my grandfather's bones out of the ground to make a picnic area. I folded the letter back up carefully, smoothed it on the table, then set it beside my coffee cup. I just sat there for a while, watching the light move across the hills, the fence line stretching along the pasture, the old red barn leaning a little to the right but still standing proud. That land wasn't just property. It was memory. Every nail in that barn, every splinter of that fence, every hoofprint in the dirt carried the weight of 100 years of Harpers working this soil. And now a group of suburban paper pushers thought they could take it because it looked underutilized. I'd been patient with them before. I didn't say a word when they told me my front gate had to be painted community brown to match the other homes. Even though my ranch existed before any of those homes were built, I ignored it when they fined me for keeping my tractor in the driveway. I even paid the stupid landscaping fee they sent after calling my wildflowers weeds. But this was different. By evening, I was sitting behind the wheel of my pickup, heading toward the new clubhouse. It rose up from the valley like a monument to everything I couldn't stand: bright, polished, glass walls reflecting the sunset like it owned the light. My boots left dry dust prints across the marble lobby floor as I walked in. The HO meeting was already in full swing. Rows of plastic chairs filled with folks in golf shirts and sundresses, sipping water bottles like they were attending a sermon. At the front, long-tabled Crosby Mitchell, the self-appointed ruler, was of Cedar Bluff. Miss Langford, the president, was speaking when I walked in. Her voice was smooth, professional, and practiced, the kind of tone that could make a theft sound like a favor. And as part of Phase 3 expansion, we're excited to announce the upcoming community park, featuring walking trails, picnic areas, and a small stable for residents interested in equestrian activities. I stepped forward before she could move to the next point. "You mean my stable?" I said. My voice carried across the room. Heads turned. Mrs. Langford blinked at me, her smile never faltering but her eyes sharpening. "Mr. Harper, we weren't expecting you tonight." "Good bet you weren't," I said, walking right up to the front table. I laid the letter down in front of her. "You want to tell me why I'm finding out from a piece of paper that you're stealing my land?" "No one is stealing anything. The association voted unanimously to reallocate underutilized property for community benefit. You'll be compensated, of course." "Underutilized," I repeated. "You ever set foot on that field? Is buried under that soil. Sweat. Calluses. My grandfather's time. My father's." She crossed her arms delicately, like I was a child making a scene. "Mr. Harper, you signed the HOA Incorporated. Section 40C gives the board discretion over shared and adjoining lands deemed part of the community trust. The boundaries were redrawn last year after the survey. If I didn't sign up for you to take what's mine," I said, leaning on the table. Those boundaries have been the same since 1932. The man beside her, Crosby, cleared his throat. "Technically, that area overlaps with the new subdivision. It's a legal gray zone. The lawyers have reviewed it thoroughly." "Yeah, lawyers." I laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. "You folks ever think maybe just because a lawyer can do something doesn't mean it's right?" Mrs. Langford gave a small sigh, like she'd been through this before and I was just another problem to manage. "You'll find the compensation fair, Mr. Harper, and you'll still have access to the new park once it's complete. We'll even name one of the trails after your family if you like." That was when the room went dead quiet. Every eye turned toward her. Not because of what she said, but because of how cold it sounded. "Name a trail after us," I said softly. "You think that makes up for stealing the land under our name?" No one answered. I could see some of the newer residents shifting in their seats, uncomfortable. They knew the ranch. They drove past it every day. They probably liked how it looked. All that open space, the horses grazing near the fence line. It made their neighborhood feel more authentic. I picked up the letter and folded it again, slow and careful. "You all do what you think you gotta do," I said. "But so will I." Mrs. Langford's voice followed me out the door, all honey and poison. "Please, Mr. Harper, let's not make this difficult. Cooperation benefits everyone." I didn't answer. The sun had set while we were talking, and when I stepped out, the air was cool and still. The moon was rising over the ridge, turning the field silver. Boone was waiting in the truck, tail thumping softly against the seat. I climbed in, turned the key, and sat there for a moment with the engine idling. Through the windshield, I could just see the outline of my land in the distance. The fences, the barn, the stretch of pasture they thought they could take with a signature. They didn't know me. They didn't know what that place meant. I drove home slow, the road crunching under my tires, every turn of the wheel a promise. If they wanted to play games with paperwork and politics, that was fine. I had something stronger, land history, and a will made of iron. They'd taken what they thought was just dirt. But they'd find out soon enough. That dirt could bite back. The first truck showed up 3 mornings later, right as the mist was lifting off the pasture. Big, shiny white ones with company logos plastered on the side. Langford Development Group. I didn't have to guess who signed the checks. They parked at the edge of the property, men in neon vests stepping out, stretching, sipping coffee like it was just another easy day. One of them pointed toward the barn and then toward the fence line that cut through the north field. That's where they stopped, because overnight something new had appeared. A fence that hadn't been there before. I'd built it in 2 sleepless nights, 1 post at a time, with Boone keeping watch and the work light burning through the dark like a star. Steel posts, every 10 feet. Heavy-duty cattle panels welded tight, bolted into the ground. 12 feet high, reinforced with wire mesh, and strung with a quiet hum of electricity that made the air around it crackle. It wasn't pretty. Not the kind of white picket thing the HOA liked to brag about in their newsletters. But it was strong, practical, uncompromising. I'd done my homework, too. The whole thing was filed with the county under temporary livestock containment. I'd made sure every inch was within code, every permit stamped and dated. It wasn't illegal. Not one bit. So when the first foreman approached me that morning, clipboard in hand, I was waiting with black coffee and a calm smile. "You the owner?" he asked. "I am," I said. "You mind telling me what this is?" He gestured toward the fence, like he couldn't believe anyone would go to that much trouble. "Temporary livestock containment," I said simply. "Got a permit right here if you'd like to see it." He frowned. "We're supposed to start grading this section for the new park today. HOA gave us clearance. FO doesn't own this land yet," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Transfer's still pending, according to the county records. So until it's finalized, this here's still Harper Ranch." They shifted uncomfortably, realizing what come in. I smiled. "Not unless you like surprises." "That fence," he stared at it, then back at me. "Hot. You mean electric?" I nodded. "Enough to make you rethink a bad decision." He muttered something under his breath and went back to his truck, dialing someone on his phone. Within the hour, another car arrived. A glossy black SUV that glided up the dirt rung in the country. Out stepped Mrs. Langford, sunglasses on, hair perfectly done despite the wind. She walked right up to me, heels sinking into the mud. "Mr. Polite enough to fool strangers. Sharp enough to cut through steel. What exactly do you think you're doing?" "Building a fence," I said. Her lips tightened. "You can't block access to community property." "Community property?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or as I know, the county says it's still mine. Until the ink's dry, I can do as I please. And since I've got livestock coming soon, I figured I'd get ready." She looked around, scanning the field. "I don't see a livestock." I smiled, just a hint. "You're looking at woman." Something in her face cracked. Surprise, irritation, maybe even a flicker of respect. Then it was gone. "You're being unreasonable," she said. "We're trying to do something beneficial for everyone here. You're only hurting yourself." "Maybe," I said, leaning on the gate. "But I'd rather hurt myself than watch someone else take what's mine." As she sighed, exasperated, and turned back to her car. "This isn't over." "I sure hope not," I called after her. For the next few weeks, the HOA tried everything. Letters from their lawyers, notices from their compliance officers, even county inspectors they thought could find a loophole in my permits. But every time the answer came back the same: the fence was legal, the ownership transfer was stalled, and there wasn't a damn thing could do. Meanwhile, I kept busy. Every morning, I walked that fence line, checking the current, tightening bolts, repainting posts. I planted sunflowers along the base just to spite them. Big, wild, defiant things that leaned toward the sky like they were proud of being outlaws. The neighbors started noticing too. Some of them waved when they drove by. A few even stopped to ask what was going on. I just told them the truth, just protecting what's mine, but word spread fast. The HOA's community project. Their shiny new community in delays. Every day the bulldozers sat idle cost them money. Contractors started pulling out. Investors got nervous. Mrs. Langford's confident little smile started to fade in those newsletter photos. Then came the day she showed up again. No SUV this time. She came on foot, walking down the dirt road in a wide-brimmed hat and sneakers. Her pride tucked somewhere between exhaustion and anger. "Mr. Harper," she said, stopping a few feet from the gate. "We need to talk. I'm listening." As she folded her arms. "We can't move forward with the development unless we resolve this situation. The board is prepared to offer you double the original compensation." "Not interested." "Triple." I shook my head. Her jaw tightened. "You're sabotaging the entire community over sentiment." I looked the hills, the barn, the open stretch of grass beyond the fence. "That's not sentiment," I said quietly. "That's legacy. You folks don't understand the difference." For a long moment, she didn't speak. The wind pushed a strand of her hair loose, and she brushed it away, eyes narrowing. "You can't win forever," she said finally. I smiled. "Forever's a long time, but I've got patience." She left without another word. By the end of summer, the project was dead. Investors had backed out, citing unforeseen property disputes. The HOA tried to blame the county, then the contractors, then me, but it didn't matter. The land sat untouched, fenced, wild and quiet. When the transfer finally cleared months later, the paperwork made the land nearly worthless. Between my fence, environmental protections, and zoning restrictions I'd quietly filed, it couldn't be developed for a decade. No park, no trails, no stables, dirt. Stubborn, untamed dirt. The HO eventually sold it at a loss, and when the auction came around, I showed up in my old hat, holding a bidder's card. I bought it back for $1. The clerk looked confused when he handed me the deed. "You just bought back what was already yours," he said. I nodded. Sometimes you gotta lose something to remind folks it's not for sale. That night, I sat on the poor feet, watching the moon rise over the fence. The steel glinted silver in the pale light, standing tall and steady against the dark. That fence wasn't just a line of metal. It was a promise. A reminder that not everything can be priced, packaged, or repurposed. Some things belong to the people who care enough to fight for them. And as long as that fence stood, they'd never forget that lesson.